produced in Pakistan? Why is it that despite how many pharmaceutical units there are? I think there are about well over 200-300 units. That we are
Over
still
700.
not on the
Over
international
700.
map. And why is it that we seem to be lagging on everything? So before I begin, let me go to Shahid Mahmood. Shahid, are you going to make a small presentation to set the discussion? Then I'll introduce the panel.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to this another
PIDE
important.
Shahid Mahmood,
Ji,
who is
sir.
a
Can
lead
you hear
on
me?
Pharmaceutical. Shahid, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you, Shahid Saab.
Okay. Well, welcome. I welcome you all to the PIDE webinar on pharmaceutical industry. This is the third in the series.
Shahid, I can't hear you.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir. Sir, मेरे ख्याल डॉक्टर नदीम साहब सर हमें नहीं सुन पा रहे, बाकी आपकी आवाज आ रही है सर.
चलें ठीक है फिर मैं.
Shahid, I can hear you. Go ahead.
But may I make a suggestion that everybody turn off their videos and mute themselves while you are speaking, because that will give you more bandwidth or whatever, and it should be a better connection for everybody.
Okay. Shahid Saab, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Saab. Again, welcome everybody to this third in the series of webinar on Pakistan's pharmaceutical industry. This is about the it relates more to the post-COVID-19 prospects for the industry. And I've started with asking the question, you can see it in the slides, is that would it be status quo, or would post-COVID-19 realities set us on a new course? The industry, the regulator, and can they reconcile their differences? Now, in the morning, I received an email and they basically it asked that, why are you doing this exercise? Is it just for the sake of academic exercise, you need to spend time on it, or is it something real? So let me just opine that this is, as I'll go through the small presentation, it's about life and death. It's about a very important industry, but unfortunately one that has been ignored for long in Pakistan. So without much ado, I have a small presentation to make, a brief presentation, because a lot of the people who are joining in today may not have been in the first two webinars. So I'll just go through briefly. There will be some basic information, and then I'll highlight some of the issues that can affect the future course of action positively. But then, of course, I'll leave it to the panelists who can and other from the pharmaceutical industry who would be able to tell me what needs to be done. So yes, that's the beginning of presentation. Can we go to the next slide? Yes, so here I'll just a few slides of basic information. It's basically more than 700 firms as per the industry, but the regulator DRAP, it says that it's not more than 639 or 640, and they've geotagged in. The estimated size is around about 3.1 billion or a bit more. But it's, if looked at in the global context, it's not even 0.3% of the global volume. Top 100 firms in Pakistan have 95% of the market share in sales. And out of the total sales, the reported figure is that 80% products are manufactured in Pakistan, while 20% are imported. Next. 95% of the raw material and active pharmaceutical ingredients for manufacturing are imported basically from China and India. Market share stands at 40:16 in favor of domestic firms who are basically producer of generic brands. And the industry employs 150,000 individuals directly and 300,000 people indirectly, which are the estimates. Next. Now this is a slide of imports and exports from 1996-7 to 2018-19. The green line represents imports, the yellow line represents exports. And as you can see at the start where I start the data, the 1996-97 fiscal year, the difference was very small, but over time this difference has started to increase. As you can see, by the green line is running away while the yellow line is rising, but only very slowly. Next. Now, over time, the difference between imports and export has widened. That's what I said in the previous. Now, you can see that clearly in the graph. If you see the trend line of the difference between imports and exports, it's moving upward, which is again a reflection of more imports and lesser exports over time. The average exports, if you take the average between 1996-7 fiscal year and 2018-19, it's more than 2 decades. The average of exports per year has been $103 million, but average of imports, it's been $300 million. Now, mind you, this data has been taken from the State Bank of Pakistan. Next. Now, foreign direct investment, which is an important component of every industry. For industry, this was once termed as a sunshine industry by a study by McKinsey for the Planning Commission. But the net FDI, if you look at the figures, it's dismal. The average FDI per fiscal year between 2001-2 and 2018-19 is only $15.6 million per fiscal year on net, which means that inflow less outflow. Only 280 millions have been received as FDI by the pharmaceutical sector in almost 2 decades. Now, you can see it in the graph that in some years, the net FDI was negative, meaning that the outflow of investment was much more in a few years than the investment coming in. But still, if you look at the industry and its potential, it's $15.6 million per fiscal year. That's nothing over the 2 decades. Next. Next slide. Okay, so here's the important question. Why are we doing all this? Are we doing this just as an academic exercise? No. Why should we care? As COVID-19 aptly demonstrated, drugs are about saving and improving the quality of our lives. Now, I've given you a few examples. Here is a simple example. Smallpox. It was a major killer for thousands of years. Until the first half of the 20th century, the mortality rate from smallpox remained a staggering 30%. In 1979, WHO declared an end to it. What put an end to this search? Well, vaccines. And you can look at every other vaccine, and it will impart. You will see the data will tell you that it imparts the same advantages. Now, there's another issue. Now, another aspect of why we should care about the pharmaceutical industry and its products, drugs that they manufacture. There's are good economic studies to back up the claim that healthy lives beget a healthy workforce, which improves the GDP by an estimated 1.5% per annum. This was stated by the research done by Kristalina Georgieva. She is now the Executive Director of International Monetary Fund. Another paper, it says that if the poor health outcomes, it reduces global GDP by at least 15% per year. Now, so you can understand the implications of poor health. And one of the aspects of poor health is non-availability of good drugs. Next slide. Here you can see what I was talking about. I've just given a simple chart of the vaccines and how many deaths that they prevented in United States. This is, mind you, this is just for the United States. You can look at the numbers. These are just staggering. So again, for the question, whoever is asking the question that why do we need to care about this industry? Here is one answer. Next. Why should we care? Again, in Pakistan, drug shortages are rampant. It's regular. Many essential life-saving medicines are in short supply over the course of the year. COVID-19, you look at India and China, they are churning out vaccines domestically produced. They are even producing foreign vaccines under license. Yesterday, about a few days ago, I heard about Cuba. They'll be producing their own homegrown COVID-19 vaccine. But in Pakistan, surprisingly, with over 700 firms and large, for a country with a heavy disease burden, large disease burden, Pakistan does not have not even a semblance of a COVID-19 vaccine or an effort to produce it. And it's not just the COVID-19 vaccine. Pakistan does not produce any vaccine. So the question is that post-COVID-19, can the situation change? Specifically, can regulations be tailored in a manner that the industry finds it easy to work to the maximum potential? Next. So what needs to change? Primarily the manner in which regulation is carried out and the manner in which industry operates. Next. When it comes to regulation, perhaps and arguably, what I have seen and what I have researched and what the industry officials would also tell you is that the most contentious of the issues is pricing. Government has been trying different tactics, let's say, to try to regulate the prices as per its whatever it wants. It went through a price freeze. The industry went through a price freeze between 2001 and 2013. Prices of drugs were not allowed to increase except for a few cases. Now then it was pricing based upon CPI, and now it's pricing based upon. We've come to a position where the pricing is it's on reference pricing. But in aggregate, if you look at the pricing regulation, they are a failure. National health accounts would tell you that out-of-pocket expenditures, despite the government regulations to hold prices down, they've increased considerably. It defeats the government's stance of making drugs affordable through strict price regulation. Refusal to grant price increases, many drugs are out of production now because they become costly to produce. Substantial welfare consequences of these policies, non-availability of essential drugs. It adversely affects health outcomes, expansion of black market and unavailable drugs, more imports, and of course, no incentive for the pharma companies to invest. Next. Now, this is an important aspect, one that I discussed in one of my previous articles for Dawn, and it is about who will carry out the research. Now, world over, governments actively subsidize pharma industry in terms of research for research into new vaccines, new technologies, and life-saving drugs. The Moderna and Pfizer COVID-19 vaccines, they use a new technology. It's called mRNA, and it came about due to a $150 million grant by the US government, by the Obama administration to these two pharmaceutical giants. Similarly, if you look at Russia and its Sputnik vaccine, financial subsidy was provided by Moscow's health department. And US and European governments have been subsidizing pharmaceutical research since 1960. Okay. And there is a good reason for it. Just a few slides, sir. There's a good reason for it. The reason is that, as COVID-19 would demonstrate, these kind of episodes have the probability to bring the whole country to a halt and ravage its economy. So in Pakistan, what's happening? Government jo hai charge kar rahi hai CRF since 1976, Central Research Fund, which is equivalent to 1% of the gross sales of the industry. But there is no research and no products. So where did all the money go? No clue, no information. So this needs to be settled. Now, the thing is, if sugar can get a subsidy worth billions of rupees every year, and it's not good for health, why not provide a subsidy to the pharmaceutical industry to produce life-saving drugs? That's one of the questions that needs to be answered. Next. Regulation, then there are SROs and the regulators' resources. SROs, take an example of February 2021 SRO, which allowed for importing corona vaccines. And then it was followed by another SRO the next month, which canceled the earlier SRO. So what kind of policy is there? You can't run a policy in SROs. There is a lot of uncertainty due to this. Then there's the regulator, maintains that it does not have the resources to properly regulate. Founded as an autonomous body, but not independent, and it's under Ministry of National Health and Regulations. And as far as its coordination with pharmaceutical industry is concerned, it's poor. So what we need is running the whole industry through SROs and an independent regulator. Next. So these are under the other issues: ensuring IP protection, toll manufacturing, import-export regulation, quality control, and GMPs. Differences in federal and provincial regulation, are they on sync? Are they same, or what kind of issues that they cause to the pharmaceutical industry? There is no long-term consistent plan. Expensive and time-consuming legal litigation because there is no alternative forum. Availability of medicines at public hospitals, it's pretty low. Complete non-seriousness about the industry at the decision-making level, and failure to recognize that adverse regulations hampering FDI prospects. Next. Okay, this is the last one, and it's about the pharma industry. Suggested changes, a few suggested changes. Very little public information. The first thing to note about this industry is that it's public has relatively low information about what the industry is, what are its operation activities. It doesn't have any quarterly, biannual, or annual publications. Overall, it has a very negative image in the media, which usually reports price increases in headlines, but they never notice that price decreases are rarely mentioned, at least in the headlines. Other positive aspects, like it's one of the largest taxpayers, its charitable activities, they never get a mention. Overall, the industry's engagement with media, it would need to increase, it would need to improve. Then lack of self-accountability mechanism and dependent upon only two sources, China and India, for raw material. Thank you. That's it for a brief introduction and for a brief way forward towards resolution of these issues. Hopefully the pharma industry, people will tell you more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahid Sab. Thank you very much. I think it's a good summary of where our current knowledge is. But I hope our panel can deepen this knowledge for us. Quite frankly, what I read is it's a small and medium industry, small enterprises, large number of them, with limited ability to produce things and limited investment in modern technology, etc. Maybe it's overregulated, but that remains to be seen. We'll hear from them. Of course, every investor says that they're overregulated, but beyond regulation, is there anything they can do? For example, I don't think from what you said that the industry seems to be doing any research at all. They're just hanging in there. But I will not go further. I will start off by introducing the panel. We've got Usman Waheed, president of Feroz Sons Laboratories, which was a very good bookshop when I was growing up, but since then has moved into a very good pharmaceutical, one of our leading pharmaceuticals. Usman is a young member of the family, so I hope to hear some positive ideas from him. Then Mr. Taqeerul Haq, the president of the Pakistan Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Associations. He's himself a pharmaceutical producer, so obviously he'll have something interesting too. Then we've got Aisha Tami Haq, who's joined us before too, president of the Pakistan Pharma Bureau, which is the, I think, the association of the multinational pharmaceuticals. Okay, so let's go to Usman Waheed. Usman Sahab, can you please tell us, what is your vision for your industry? Are you ever going to be a Bayer or a Moderna or something? Are you always going to be a small and medium enterprise? And what is stopping you from doing it? You, mashallah, are from a large family, moneyed family, have been in business for a long time. And now you've got, I'm sure you're a very well-educated young man. Do we expect better from you, or is it going to be SME all the way through?
Thank you very much, VC Sahab, for that introduction and that challenge. You've thrown the gauntlet right at the beginning. And also, I'm grateful to Shahid Sahab for the really, comprehensive introduction. So I don't think there's any issue of talent. There's not an issue of ability to invest or willingness to invest. But there are certain fundamentals, sir, that I would really like to bring to your notice that make Pakistan a very unique place in the healthcare world. So the first of them is that when the COVID pandemic happened, and this is just one example of our approach to public health, this Riyasat-e-Medina was the first country in the world to leave its citizens to the private sector to vaccinate. There has been no large-scale public procurement of vaccines. And as a result, we have the lowest vaccination rate in the entire region. Fortunately or unfortunately, in the entire world, even in the richest countries on the planet, people don't vaccinate themselves at their own cost, the government vaccinates them. That's the nature of vaccination worldwide. That equation applies in the US, it applies in Sweden, it applies in Germany. It should also apply in Pakistan, unfortunately, because it doesn't. We don't have the vaccine penetration rates on almost any program that is not publicly funded. So jab tak ye ek dilemma rahega, the incentive for the pharmaceutical sector, despite all its willingness, capabilities, etc., will always be hampered by the fact that there'll be no market for that to support that investment. Vaccines are not small investment tickets. So if you're looking at fill and finish, you're looking at a minimum $20 to $30 million investment. And if you're looking at all the way back to seed production of vaccines, that investment exceeds $100 million. मैं आपको इसकी मिसाल एक देता हूँ, इसके implications of what I just said by the example of the flu vaccine. So Pakistan has no public sector flu vaccination program. Everybody in Pakistan is left to vaccinate themselves. And despite the fact that flu is a deadly disease that everybody should be vaccinated against on an annual basis, the number of people who actually get vaccinated for the flu annually is not more than 200, 250,000. So jab tak ek public sector interest nahi aayega in procurement of vaccines, and again, this is not a subsidy, this is not handouts, this is just basic, public health economics. So tab tak I'm afraid this picture is very unlikely to change, and if it is, somebody or the other will go bankrupt. तो अभी शायद साहब ने अपने इंट्रोडक्शन में भी एक एग्जांपल दिया था of the US government support to Pfizer and Moderna. I'd just like to correct the figures. It's not $150 million. The payment to Moderna alone was about $1 billion, plus purchase commitments of $1.5 billion in addition to that $1 billion grant. So that's the nature of vaccine support. Uska fraction bhi Pakistan mein kuch seriousness aaye in terms of procurement, even not even grants or subsidies, you will see the private sector respond very quickly. So those are my initial comments. You're on mute.
Thank you very much, folks. Dr. Sab, ये इन्होंने बात जो की वैक्सीन के हवाले से की, and I fully appreciate that. But can you please tell me कि पाकिस्तान में generic drugs क्यों नहीं बनती? आप लोगों ने एक किस्म की जेनेरिक ड्रग ही बनाई हुई है पर अपने ब्रांड नेम के साथ. कोई मुझे लग नहीं रहा कि जेनेरिक इंडस्ट्री हमारी कोई इतनी स्ट्रांग है, और क्या हम जेनेरिक इंडस्ट्री में कुछ एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं कि नहीं? आफ्टर ऑल इंडिया ने बहुत बड़ी मार्केट ली हुई है जेनेरिक की, बाकी मुल्कों ने भी ली हुई है. तो मेरा सवाल वहीं वापस आ जाता है कि ये इंडस्ट्री मैं बचपन से देख रहा हूँ, और माशाल्लाह मेरी उम्र कोई थोड़ी नहीं है, चलो 40 साल के लगभग तो होगी, पर मसला यह है कि क्या आप लोग स्मॉल एंड मीडियम इंडस्ट्री कब छोड़ेंगे? कब आप लोग आएंगे मार्केट में और एक बड़े प्लेयर्स की तरह खेलेंगे कि नई ड्रग्स बनाएंगे, रिसर्च करेंगे और मार्केट शेयर क्लेम करेंगे? तौकीर साहब.
जी, अस्सलाम वालेकुम जी. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me for this webinar. देखिए, the good part of pharmaceutical industry is that over the last 15 years, the national pharmaceutical company has significantly grown. If you look at the total market of pharmaceutical, which is 3.1 billion, out of which about 69% is with national pharmaceutical companies. And these national companies have evolved very, very rapidly over the last 15 to 20 years. And they are producing quality medicine, and they are entering into export as well. So I think all national pharmaceutical companies are manufacturing generic products and Me Too products. The issue is that how to go further. Basically, that needs a very, very consistent policies from DRAP and from the government. If you look for the last from 2001 till 2015, we were just revolving here and there, meeting government, DRAP, and everywhere, whatever the government was to have pricing policy. So the industry was tied up for its survival, because from 2001 till 2013 there was no price increase, and it was considered as if pharmaceutical industry is working in a planet where there is no what you call inflation, dollar rate जो है वो वहीं का वहीं 60 रुपए पे मौजूद है, and cost of doing business is not increasing. So that was a very unnatural phenomena, and the industry, you know, really fought for the last 15 years for its survival. And what happened when this unnatural price increase, pricing policy was not there? So this unnatural mechanism you know, led towards shortage of many medicines, especially the life-saving medicine. So by grace of Allah, with our efforts from the industry, we have been able to finally get a pricing policy in 2018. So that should remain intact. And once the industry has this confidence that there are consistent policies, government is supporting them, then, you know, we will, you know, as you were saying that we don't have vaccine. Why we don't have vaccine? Because these are all biological products, and we have to, you know, there is no, unfortunately, there is no policy here, no infrastructure here. So in order to see industry growing and going for vaccines and bringing new molecules and doing research, which you were saying, first of all, we should have a very, very consistent policy, incentivized schemes, and the policies which are, you know, stable. Only then industry will, you know, start thinking, going beyond whatever they are doing it now, towards, you know, vaccines also, bringing new molecules, doing research. So I think that the most important thing for us at this point in time is that government should hold hands and should consider pharmaceutical industry an industry which is very, very important, because we are providing medicines for the masses. So I think government should, you know, hold our hand.
Ji, ye, Tammy, Aisha, it seems to me the pharmaceutical industry is saying again and again that it's the government's fault, and that the government should give us a free hand in pricing, and that the government should give us buy a product. So what about competition? What about the industry trying to develop new products? What about जहाँ तक मैंने मार्केट सुनी है, मार्केट तो होती है नई प्रोडक्ट्स बनाना, मार्केट तो होती है कि नए तरीक़ेकार निकालना काम करने के. तो are you telling me your industry is doing that, or are you just copying other countries and still not succeeding in growing yourself?
Thank you, Nadeem, and thank you, Shahid, for that really wonderful introduction, really comprehensive. And Nadeem, you've been incredible to host all these webinars to create awareness on the issue of pharmaceuticals, and especially in this pandemic, you know. So I think what we should do is we should, at least I feel, that one should be a little positive and move forward and stop blaming everybody. And you know, maybe come up with some good ideas and some solutions, present them to the government, and try and move forward on all this. This pandemic, like, you know, any disaster, always provides opportunity as well. And we need to look at what opportunities there are. I mean, obviously, we cannot start manufacturing vaccines tomorrow. We need to have the proper infrastructure in place, et cetera, et cetera. So we should look at what we've got. We should look at how we can fix it, how we can improve it, how we can build on it, and what all needs to be done. Someone like Usman has an excellent facility. He has a biologicals facility. He needs to possibly get some international accreditation, and, you know, he can start manufacturing vaccines. But before anyone can do anything, RAP has to get its act together. They've got to get WHO certified, because until they do that, nobody else can manufacture anything, because they're not in a position to approve your manufacturing. So, you know, there are all these things that one needs to consider and look at. I don't think there's a problem vis-a-vis investment if the opportunity is there, if the regulation is in place, if people are serious about doing something. So, you know, let's just look at our neighbor. Why reinvent the wheel? Look at what they've done. India was a completely closed economy, as you know. Nothing was allowed to be imported, et cetera, et cetera. And they set up the pharmaceutical industry, as you like to call it, you know, a small, medium enterprise. And people were doing biological stuff in bathtubs and things. I mean, they were experimenting in their flats in Bombay and places like that, in Pune. And what they have managed to do is they have managed to create a humongous industry. They're one of the biggest in the world. We buy so much API from them. Approximately 60%, I think, we're buying from India. All our anti-rabies vaccine comes from India. Snake bite vaccine comes from India. So the thing was that India started off by copying. They copied what everybody else made, so the generic situation, but they were copying, they were infringing patents, etc. And then they got into research. And when they got into research, they realized the importance of IPR. I think here in Pakistan, we have so many issues that we need to tackle all at the same time, and no one's willing to touch anything. We have to tackle something like IPR. I know it's a very unpopular thing for the national industries, but until you do that, no one is going to invest in research. Why would you spend $4 billion if you can't protect your investment? I mean, you don't have $4 billion to just throw. So you need to protect the product of that $4 billion. So I think we need to be realistic also about $4 billion. It's not, $400 or $4,000 or even $400,000. We're talking huge sums of money. So what we need to do is we need to look at what the real issues are, how we can take the small and medium enterprise and turn it into something big, and what difficult decisions we need to make. Do we really need 700 companies when only 100 companies are making 98% of everything in this country? Don't we want quality in product, quality companies? Don't we want those companies to succeed and invest more? I mean, let's look at what we can do now, today. We can't make a vaccine for this pandemic. There's no question of it. Cuba, a tiny little island in the Caribbean, as Shahid mentioned, is working on 5 different vaccines. I mean, they have invested hugely in healthcare and research and all these things, but they've invested in it. I mean, when we had the earthquake, they sent 1,800 doctors to Pakistan. And I mean, that's when we established diplomatic relations with Cuba. We didn't have an embassy in Cuba, and they didn't have an embassy in Pakistan until post the earthquake. So we need to look at what we have, how well we can use it, and where we need to go from here. The NIH, by the way, has a vaccine facility that was set up in the 1960s. And the intention was that Pakistan would be the vaccine hub for this entire region. Pakistan never became anything. The NIH facility is pretty much in shambles. I understand they are trying to resuscitate it and bring it up to some sort of speed, but it is not certified. It doesn't have any international accreditation. That means that its processes are not in place. It's those whatever you call them. When you do any kind of manufacturing project, you have to have certain certifications. They don't have anything in place, but they need to get them. They need to get them really quickly. The draft needs to get them. And when they get them, everyone else is going to be incentivized to do the same. So I think that, let's move in a positive direction. Let's take these small and medium enterprises out of the doldrums and turn them into big, huge, successful enterprises.
Thank you. But I return to my question, which I think, although you guys have addressed it, but Usman Sahab, let me ask you very simple. कि आपकी जो industry है, क्या इसमें कोई research capacity है? Do you develop anything new, or do you just copy other countries? And haven't we been copying for the last 70 years? When are you guys moving to research and development of things yourself?
Very frankly, what we have in place is a largely generic industry, which means we acquire processes from outside and we replicate them here. We can grow into a research base, but that will require a lot of the elements that Tammy just mentioned, and Taqir Saab also discussed at the beginning. Instead of sort of getting support for research, we are taxed on what is called a central research fund. Shahid Saab mentioned it at the beginning, and even that is not returned to the industry to use for research. So, when you have such a depressed industry, suboptimal pricing, very little room is left to research. Is an expensive enterprise. Not to say it can't be done, but you need, just as the government needs fiscal space to expand its infrastructure program, companies also need the same fiscal space to expand their research infrastructure.
ओके साहब, ये बताइए कि ये जो बात कह रहे हैं उस्मान साहब, बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहे हैं, आई एग्री। बट आपकी इंडस्ट्री में रेट ऑफ रिटर्न क्या है? क्योंकि जब मैं देखता हूँ आपके जो माशाल्लाह फार्मास्यूटिकल वाले हैं, उनका लाइफस्टाइल मुझे कोई गरीब तो नहीं लगता। उनका मुझे लाइफस्टाइल ये नहीं लगता कि जैसे उनके पैसे नहीं बन रहे। मतलब माशाल्लाह पोर्शेस भी उनके पास हैं, बीएमडब्ल्यूज भी हैं, फिर कहते हैं कि जी हमारे पास रिसर्च के पैसे नहीं है। तो मेरा मतलब आपका रेट ऑफ रिटर्न के बहुत लो है। मेरा तो ख्याल है कि रेट ऑफ रिटर्न आपकी इंडस्ट्रीज का क्या होगा, ROI आपकी इंडस्ट्री का
Dr.
एवरेज?
Post-tax, we're a publicly listed company, so it's available on the internet, and it's high single digits, maybe early double digits, 10, 11. So it's not a very high rate of return. So I think if you actually look at the numbers, गाड़ी का किसको क्या शौक है वो तो मैं नहीं कर सकता. That's an individual choice. But generally, our companies are nowhere near at the state of wealth that generally the pharma industry is considered to be worldwide. और उसी वजह से जो आप एक पॉजिटिव इन्वेस्टमेंट की जरूरत है वो नहीं.
Also, sorry, could I
Go
just
ahead.
interrupt for 1
Please go ahead.
second before Toki comes on? It's just that I feel that this is not a kind of a proactive way to go forward. I mean, to say that it's a bad thing to make money. It's not a bad thing to make money. It's a good thing to make money, because then you can reinvest that money. You can do lots of things with that money. I think the key here is that what Osman said is that you have a central research fund. 1% of your gross profits are paid into the central research fund every year. I estimated it was about 6 billion rupees last year that went into the central research fund. And we don't know what happens to that. And that has been collected since 1976. Where is that money? What research has been done with it? Why is it taken from the industry? Why isn't the industry encouraged to do its own research? You talked about competition. You can't have competition in a highly regulated industry. Your prices are fixed. You can't research. You can't do anything. Where's the competition?
ठीक है जी, ठीक है. बट देन ये भी बताइए कि आफ्टर ऑल आपके पास जो 100 इंडस्ट्रीज हैं, दे आर ऑब्वियसली मेकिंग मनी, दे आर मेकिंग अ प्रॉफिट, एंड दे आर बेसिकली जस्ट मेकिंग अ प्रॉफिट ऑफ कन्वर्टिंग द old drugs into drugs here, which is fair enough. I appreciate that. I'm a consumer of those drugs, and I think it's a very important function that you perform. But as an economist sitting here in a public policy think tank, my job is to try and help the government understand how we can make the pharmaceutical industry become a meaningful industry. Because अभी तो जो शाहिद ने figures quote किए हैं, मेरा ख्याल आप लोगों की जो total product does not even come to 1% of GDP. I think you're much lower than that. So I would be interested in seeing, as I said, मेरा angle to public policy का है. I would be interested in seeing you people at least 3 or 4% of GDP कुछ तो produce कर रहे हो. And I would like to see a large number of your companies listed on the stock exchange and actually capable of performing in the global value chain. तो इसमें जरा मुझे मोटी बात बताएं आयशा, what exactly would you require for your companies to grow at 25% per annum, which is what they should be growing at?
I think you need to deregulate this industry to the
What does that mean? Uska matlab kya?
To the extent of control on pricing. We've said it 100 times on your webinars also. What you need to do is...
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So what you need to do is you need, I lose my train of thought with this. Deregulate in terms of price, have an essential drugs list, which we have, which is the WHO list, which the government has decided is the essential drug list. And you control those prices. So we are a poor country, so people get very, very, very cheap medicines. But encourage the industry to compete with each other in other fields. Encourage them. Let there be free market pricing. And control quality. Unless you control quality, what's the point? I mean, you're ingesting these medicines. It's not like, you're buying a handbag, a cheap knockoff handbag or something, or a pair of jeans that if you bought the original, it's $1,000 US, and if you bought the knockoff, it's $25. It doesn't matter. It's not going to kill you. But if you take a fake medicine or a substandard medicine, it could kill you. So I think that, we need to be clear about progress. And again, I say, look at what India has done. They have allowed their companies, they've deregulated, they've reduced price controls, they protect patents, they do all the things that all these other countries have done in the past, and their industry has flourished. And there are some, there are some drugs in Pakistan that are really, really, really old drugs and cheap drugs and effective drugs, old penicillins and things. We have those. Leave them alone. Keep them in the market. Do not price them out by lowering the price so much that nobody can make them. You cannot have a drug priced in 2000 and the same price in 2021. 21 years later, the inputs have gone up. You've got to keep with inflation at least. So if you do that, you will keep cheap drugs in the market, the essential stuff that people need, and then let everybody else go out and manufacture, research, do biologicals, do all these things, bring them to the market. Have health insurance. We don't even have that in Pakistan. Most countries in the world have either some sort of form of health insurance or they have government subsidized healthcare.
देखिए, आप लोग हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस तो आपका काम है ना बनाना, हुकूमत का काम तो नहीं ना बनाना. अब ये भी जरा ज्यादती है कि आपके हुकूमत सब कुछ करे. आई थिंक क्वाइट फ्रैंकली दैट आल्सो हैज टू बी थॉट ऑफ वेरी केयरफुली. क्यों जी तौकीर साहब, I still haven't got the idea, what is it that you guys want to grow at 25% per annum? And how will you take your own risks, and how will you develop new things and new business plans and not just sit there on drap, mercy?
In order to grow, say, by 25%, as Aisha already explained, that the prices should be decontrolled. Why we are saying this, that you have recently seen that most of the life-saving drugs were short in the market and they were not available, and their prices were very low. But they, for one person, if he's having an issue, so that medicine is very, very important for him. So what happened that either the patient were not getting those medicine, or they were bound to buy a smuggled product at 10 times at more price. So in order to grow, as I've already explained, that and Aisha was also saying that we should be deregulated and let the market forces decide about the price. And secondly, what happens that the lifeline of pharmaceutical industry is new treatments and new products. So new treatment is important for the industry and for the pharmaceutical industry, and also for the patients as well. So what happens that we invest a lot in developing the products, and it takes more than 1.5 years to get the price fixed by the government. So I think that once the policies should be industry friendly, and if the industry has confidence that if they are investing into new molecule, it will be treated on priority, and the registration and prices will be given on time. So once this will start happening, industry will not only be able to grow, it will bring new molecules, but it will think to go beyond manufacturing products. As you know that about 95% of our APIs, which is raw material, we have to import it from India and China. So if industry is deregulated and DRAP is taking decision for price fixation and registration and giving license on time, so the industry will not only flourish, but it will now start thinking going for our own manufacturing of APIs. You are talking about the research that is, I think maybe 10 years down the road, but the initial importance is that we should be self-sufficient for our APIs, because lots of our money goes to in importing raw materials. And if the raw materials we are able to get APIs manufactured locally here, it will not only make sure availability of the drugs, but it will it will lead towards less import, and maybe in future we will be going for export as well, exporting the APIs. So we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Dr. Nadeem, kindly unmute yourself, sir.
My call is जी तौकीर साहब, why can't you make APIs? ये जो molecules हैं, मैं बहुत सुनता आ रहा हूँ और बड़ी देर से सुनता आ रहा हूँ. तो चलें उस्मान साहब आप बताइए, you want to tell us why you can't make molecules? A large enterprise like you can't make molecules.
Ji, Dr. Saab, I'd just like to kind of add a few facts and figures to support what just both Taqir Saab and Aisha just said. So, आपने एक बड़ी अच्छी बात की कि why can't we, as an industry, contribute 3-4% of GDP? आपको अंदाजा भी हमने क्यूबा का भी नाम लिया था कि क्यूबा एज अ परसेंट ऑफ GDP हेल्थ केयर पे कितना स्पेंड करता है? It's close to 12%.
ठीक.
हम कितना करते हैं? 0.9%. So if your healthcare spending, which is your market, is 0.9% of GDP, you can't have an industry 3 times that size. We're not trying to put everything in the government's basket, but the fact is that universal health coverage, health insurance, education, ये basic fundamental responsibilities हैं government. So जो basic fundamentals हैं हम उन्हीं की बात कर रहे हैं. अगर आप इंडिया और पाकिस्तान को compare करें, अभी हम हमेशा देखते हैं कि India has grown into a giant of an industry. Pakistan deregulated a year before India did, but we reversed our policy within 6 months of making it. India virtually copied Pakistan's deregulation policy a year later. So almost a year after Pakistan deregulated, India did, but India didn't reverse it. So we can't do everything that's the opposite of the rest of the world and expect a result which is the same as the rest of the world. जब तक ये fundamentals ठीक नहीं होंगे, हम as an industry आगे नहीं बढ़ सकेंगे. It's not out of lack of trying or lack of ability to invest or willingness or talent. It's just these fundamentals need to be fixed. We can't operate outside the laws of economics.
But what about DRAP? ये बताइए आप में से कोई. DRAP जो है Drug Regulatory Authority बनी हुई है. Is it capable of regulating the industry for growth? जो मुझे बहुत तकलीफ होती है, हमारी सारी regulatory bodies सोचती हैं वो थानेदार हैं. They don't think that they're market developers. Whereas, I mean, when I look at the SEC, for example, in the US, or I look at the FDA, although FDA is also, fairly tight, but FDA allows the market to develop. Is our regulatory body DRAP capable of regulating the market and making it grow?
It is, and it actually, Thanedar is case mein to thoda sa hona padega. What they need to be a Thanedar over is quality, as Tammy said. जब तक वो क्वालिटी रेगुलेशन नहीं आएगी
तो शौकत खान ने कहा था टोडो.
उस्मान साहब सर कंटिन्यू सर.
जी, सो मैं ये कह रहा था कि जब तक क्वालिटी रेगुलेशन ड्रैप इफेक्टिवली नहीं करेगा तो उस हद तक तो ड्रैप को थानेदार होना पड़ेगा. अभी चैलेंज ये है दैट यू हैव अ रेगुलेटर दैट इज नॉट एम्पावर्ड, जिनके चीफ एग्जीक्यूटिव्स जो हैं वो टेम्पररी बेसिस पे अपॉइंट होते हैं, तमाम डायरेक्टर्स भी टेम्पररी बेसिस पे अपॉइंट होते हैं. देयर इज एब्सोल्युटली जीरो ऑटोनॉमी विद इन ड्रैप.
So sorry, who is
empower करें तो यही लोग आपको वो functions deliver करना शुरू कर देंगे. And the other thing is that the pricing function has to sit separately from the regulation function. अगर आपने एक ही पार्टी को प्राइस और क्वालिटी दोनों दे दी तो वो फिर प्राइस पे फोकस करेगा, because all the political capital invests in pricing. Quality हमेशा इग्नोर होगी. You need to separate pricing and quality, give that to commerce, the pricing function, the import and export function, and regulate quality in a standardized manner. We have great people at DRAP. They need to be empowered. They need to be enabled. वो नहीं है, unfortunately.
ये मुझे बताइए ड्रैप रन कौन कर रहा है?
Sorry, I would also add in this that DRAP certainly has capability and capacity to doing so, but as Usman was saying that if the CEO DRAP and their directors are not permanent, and after every 3 months directors become non-functional, and then it takes a month's time to get them restored again. And plus DRAP also faces human resource, they don't have enough human resource to regulate the industry, jo ki 600-700 pharmaceutical companies hain. And I would also agree that they should concentrate on quality. And if the DRAP ki ye jo functionality hai isko consistent kar diya jaye, and the CEO and all directors are functional, so I think 50% improvement wahi se aa jayegi, because continuity hogi and they will be taking decision. When they will know that they are there permanently, and they are, because no institution can take any long-term or short-term decision for any industry if the regulators and the directors are not permanent and they are working on ad hoc basis. So the first step towards bringing this industry towards a consistent growth and is basically the DRAP की जो functionality है और जो DRAP का infrastructure है वो thorough होना चाहिए, complete होना चाहिए, and उनके ऊपर भी अगर उनकी if we look from their viewpoint उनके पास भी हर department में they lack resources, human resource की कमी है और जिस तरीके से regulation बढ़ रही है, CTD format पे हम आ गए हैं and the CGMP guidelines जो हैं वो strict होती जा रही हैं, तो they also need qualified people to regulate the industry.
So then we should really seriously look at DRAP. क्यों हमने DRAP में कोई study available है जी DRAP में that you guys have seen? Can you give us a study on DRAP that we should try and summarize and try and find out what DRAP is? Aisha, do you have anything?
No, I don't, but I'm sure Shahid has a lot of information on DRAP.
क्यों जनाब, anybody has anything? उस्मान साहब,
सर एक दो स्टडीज हुई हैं, बट वन ऑफ देम इज अ बिट ओल्ड, लेकिन उसने सिर्फ कुछ ही फंक्शंस ड्रैप के वो किए थे, स्टडी किए थे. सो एज आई मेंशन्ड टू यू एंड as I had discussed with Aisha, if our studies go through, our project goes through, so there will be a comprehensive analysis of DRAP and its functions and their outcomes.
I would suggest कि उसको जरूर प्लीज दूसरी रेगुलेटरी बॉडीज के साथ कंपेयर करें. कंपेयर DRAP to OGRA, to PEMRA, see their powers, see their who they report to, the structure.
Would you people be willing to fund such a study? यहाँ सब चुप हो गए.
I'm waiting for the
Didn't hear you.
Silence is ominous. The silence is ominous.
You cut off completely. What were you saying about a study?
I'm saying, would you people be willing to fund a study to understand the regulatory and market structure of the industry? Because quite frankly, there is none available. And I think your industry should be funding such a study, just like we asked the petroleum industry to fund such a study. Unfortunately, the problem is that hamare industrialists, I'm not blaming you people, hamare industrialists, my friends in Punjab Club and Sindh Club, do not like to research, they only like to lobby.
Actually,
support research.
Yeah, I'll just
we have been involved in supporting research, and I mean, I would support it. The Pharma Bureau.
Even now, Tammy, there's a report that's about to be published, funded by the Pakistan Business Council, and the pharma companies are part of that. It's a study undertaken by LUMS, and it's on the verge of publication.
Okay, we'd like to
get all these.
Can you give us a copy?
Absolutely. As soon as it's made available, we'll send you a copy right away.
Achha, okay. And that study will assess regulatory structures and market structures or not?
Yes. Okay. It's a very comprehensive study.
I'd love to look at it, because quite frankly, I think where we fail, correct me if I'm wrong, where we fail is that our industry thinks, and I've been told this directly by many people who I shall not name, obviously, कि जी तुहाडे नाल गल करन दा की फायदा, ਅਸੀਂ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰੀ ਚ ਬਹਿ ਜਾਈਏ, ਉੱਥੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰੀਏ, ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਭ ਕੁਝ ਲੱਭ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ. ठीक है, so long as our industry has this attitude, you are cutting your own feet, because होता ही है जो इन्फ्लुएंशियल लोग हैं वो SRO ले लेते हैं, बाकी रोते हैं, इंडस्ट्री वहीं की वहीं बैठी रहती है. This is what happened in the automobile sector, this is what's happened in the textile sector, this is what's happened in the fertilizer sector. अब इसको हम कैसे टैकल करें?
I think what we've been doing is we've been working with all the associations, business councils, everyone, and been working and talking to the government, trying to get policy in place. And an example of that, Nadeem, is that we managed in 2018. But that was really because the then Chief Justice decided he was pretty fed up of everything, and he thought there were so many cases in court. But he ordered the government and the industry to sit together and thrash out a pricing policy, which they did. And it was working fine until the current government fiddled with it last year. So the thing is that you've got to, once you thrash out a policy, you have to let it work. You have to let it run for a certain period of time. You have to have some kind of consistency. Industry and the government have to trust each other. So, we managed to do that, but we've had a little setback, in terms of of that policy last year, which we keep trying to fix, but it's not yet sorted. But the thing is that, as Usman said, you need proper regulation. You need to take pricing, park it somewhere else. Quality has to be run by the DRAP. They've got to be empowered. They've got to have a proper chief executive. They have to have proper directors, people who are empowered to make decisions, take decisions, and ensure that whatever drug you go out to buy is the right drug. You're not getting something substandard or something that you shouldn't take and you'll die if you take it. Because there have been a few of those also.
ठीक. Ji Usman Saab and Taqi Saab, what would you say?
Sorry, Taqi Saab, please go ahead. Study का तो मैंने जिक्र कर दिया था. It's a comprehensive study that's been funded on the industry. It'll come out soon.
Sorry, funded by who, Usman Saab?
The PBC, the Pakistan Business Council.
Okay, good. जी.
वो study सामने आती है तो I think that will bring new avenues to understand and to see how can these problems can be resolved. और प्लस ये कि मैं एक चीज़ ऐड करना चाह रहा था यहाँ, मे बी थोड़ा सा मिस कर दिया था कि as you were saying that how the industry can grow further. Another thing is that contract manufacturing, that policy was so restrictive and it was not attracting pharmaceutical companies to go for this. So recently we had a detailed discussion with DRAP and ministry and who are the stakeholders. So I think DRAP is about to modify the contract manufacturing facility. If you look at India, वहाँ पे जो contract manufacturing policy इतनी friendly है कि they have attracted lots of investors outside India, and now India is the hub for making medicines for many international companies. So I believe that one of the futuristic approach should be that we should also have very friendly and practical contract manufacturing policy that will bring new businesses, and that is another avenue to grow. बाकी जैसे आयशा कह रही थी कि जो प्राइसेस को जो है वो पार्क कर दिया जाए मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ कॉमर्स में, और इधर if the DRAP 100% focuses on quality and issuing licensing, giving registration and monitoring the quality, तो 100% focus उधर होगा तो at one point in time our quality will improve. और secondly ये कि प्राइसेस अगर उधर होंगी मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ कॉमर्स में तो वो टाइमली हमें प्राइसेस मिलती रहेंगी एज पर द पॉलिसी, वट एवर द पॉलिसी इज. सो आई थिंक स्पीड इज द नेम ऑफ द गेम. Policies should be there. We should have confidence on those policies, and the executional excellence is key to success. बहुत सी चीज़ें आसान हैं, उनको डिसीजन लेते लेते महीनों गुजर जाते हैं और फिर इधर से उधर होता है. तो अगर तो ग्रो करना है तो ये खाली इंडस्ट्री का काम नहीं है. Industry is ready to grow, but it should be strongly supported by stable policies और speed हो DRAP के level पे भी, government के level पे भी, क्योंकि nations cannot या institutions cannot grow until and unless जो right decision at the right time and timely execution of policies is the key and the confidence for the industry to grow.
अच्छा जी, मैं एक छोटी सी बात कर दूं, उसके ऊपर आप लोग प्लीज कमेंट करिएगा. मैं अभी ड्रैप के वेबसाइट पे बैठा हूं और मैं ड्रैप की वेबसाइट एग्जामिन करता रहा हूं व्हाइल यू वर स्पीकिंग फोक्स, एंड आई हैव बीन लुकिंग एट दिस. आप लोगों ने कहा है ड्रैप बहुत अच्छी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, येट उसका चीफ एग्जीक्यूटिव बदल जाता है, येट उसके पास ह्यूमन कैपिटल नहीं. सो आई डोंट नो व्हाट यू आर सेइंग, बट व्हेन आई लुक एट द website, I see, for example, that there is a policy board, and the policy board comprises of all the secretaries. अब जो FDA का वहाँ है उसमें तो कोई सेक्रेटरी नहीं है, उसमें सिर्फ वो प्रोफेशनल्स हैं. Now here they've got 5-6 secretaries, maybe 7 secretaries, और वो बोर्ड पे हैं, और कोई 5-6 डॉक्टर हैं वेरियस जगह से, बलूचिस्तान, खैबर पख्तूनख्वा, सिंध, मतलब प्रोविंसेस से. ठीक है. सो ये पॉलिसी बोर्ड तो मुझे नहीं लग रहा that is capable of understanding the situation and working with it. ठीक है जी. नंबर 2, जब मैं डिविजन्स पे जाता हूँ तो वो भी बड़ी थिनली, ठीक है नाम अच्छे हैं बट बड़ी थिनली स्टाफ, बड़ी थिन चीज़ें हैं. इनकी वैकेंसी के नोटिस 2019 से लगे हुए हैं। जब मैं डाउनलोड पे जाता हूँ, दे हैव नथिंग देयर एक्सेप्ट देयर लॉज एंड जो थोड़ी बहुत इनके रूल्स शूल्स हैं। इट सीम्स दिस एजेंसी एब्सोल्युटली डज नो रिसर्च एट ऑल। ठीक है जी। So is this agency capable of regulating the structure? Because quite frankly, we make officers without worrying about what those officers are capable of doing. Yeah, pharmaceutical, as far as I'm concerned, is probably even more difficult a sector to manage than the stock exchange or than the media or whatever. This is a very difficult sector because it's very, very complex, very, very scientific. We need serious scientific people on the policy board. We need serious scientific research here. So how would you react to this? Am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong, Dr. Saab, but the challenge really is कि आप अगर किसी take a private sector company, अगर आपने उसमें radical changes लाने हैं, you call in the chief executive as the board, and you say कि ये आपसे हम expect करते हैं, ये आपकी accountability होगी, ये आपके पास ताकत है, आप जाओ करो। लेकिन अगर आप कुछ भी करने नहीं दोगे और लोग लगे रहेंगे, तो इट्स नॉट कि उन लोगों में इनहेरेंट कैपेसिटी नहीं है या कैपेबिलिटी नहीं है टू डिलीवर। बट अगर स्ट्रक्चर ऐसा है कि something as simple as a hardship case for pricing for a drug that is not in market, that people are dying in the absence of, वो भी कैबिनेट के पास जाता है 2-2 साल फैसला होने के लिए। एक फेडरल ड्रग एनालिस्ट की अपॉइंटमेंट जो है वो कैबिनेट के पास पड़ी रहती है। सो वो ड्रैप करेगा क्या अगर उसके पास एक हायरिंग की वो नहीं है कैपेसिटी? इफ दे कांट, जिन एक्सपर्ट्स की आप जिक्र कर रहे हैं, दोस एक्सपर्ट्स आर अवेलेबल आउटसाइड ड्रैप ऑफ कोर्स, बट अगर सीईओ एम्पावर्ड ही नहीं होगा टू ब्रिंग दोस पीपल ऑन बोर्ड, एंड इफ ही is empowered to deliver, he'll certainly do that. There's no reason why he would behave differently. But वो उसको आप एक enabling environment तो देंगे, उसके बाद फिर उसे पूछेंगे।
ठीक ठीक। Okay जी, let me take a question from the floor. Shahid Afridi साहब, Saeed Afridi, sorry, Saeed Afridi साहब।
Assalamu alaikum.
वालेकुम।
Thank you very much for the discussion. मेरा सवाल जो है वो rather systemic है rather than the individual nuts and bolts of the pharma industry. I mean, whether you look at the large developed pharmaceutical industries जिन countries में है, वहाँ पे it's not the government but it's the industry associations जो हैं वो instigate करती हैं कि policies क्या होनी चाहिए, फिर उनके लिए lobby करती हैं और फिर ensure करती हैं कि government की healthcare funding जो है वो उस तरफ जाए। और इंडिया की बार बार मिसाल पाकिस्तान में दी जाती है और लिखा भी जाता है हमारे अखबारों में, बट वन ऑफ द थिंग्स दैट एवरीबडी सीम्स टू इग्नोर इज दैट आफ्टर द इनिशियल डीरेगुलेशन, यस उसमें गवर्नमेंट का हाथ था, उसमें देयर वाज अ लॉट ऑफ WHO हेल्प एज वेल, बट वंस दैट डीरेगुलेशन वाज डन, इट वाज the IDMA, the Indian Drug Manufacturers Association, that took the lead and has consistently stayed 2 steps ahead of the government. उन्होंने North America और EU को mimic किया, and they would formulate policies that they would then lobby the government to follow. So it's not the government that's doing this in India. It's actually the industry that is leading the government. Government उनकी भी उतनी ही dysfunctional है in this area, और IDMA की जो मेन कंसर्न होती है जो वो तकरीबन हर 1-2 साल के बाद रेज करते हैं, वो ये कि जी हमने तो किया है ये, गवर्नमेंट इज टेकिंग इट्स टाइम, एंड इवन विद ऑल ऑफ दैट दे हैव मैनेज्ड टू ग्रो एट एन अलार्मिंग पेस। नाउ पाकिस्तान में आपकी एक्टिव फार्मास्यूटिकल इंग्रेडिएंट्स आप कोई 95% के करीब, जिस तरह भी कोई कह रहा था, इंपोर्ट करते हैं। बायोलॉजिकल प्रोडक्ट्स जो हैं और मेडिकल डिवाइसेस आप सारी इंपोर्ट करते हैं। सो गिवन दिस स्टेट ऑफ द इंडस्ट्री, why has the pharmaceutical industry itself not managed to self-organize, and why is it so government dependent? Industry जो है वो periodic proposals देती है comprehensive policies की और guidance की for the government to follow. ये चीज पाकिस्तान में क्यों नहीं होती? Why is everything waiting for the government? Whereas जहाँ पे successfully उन्होंने किया है, वहाँ पे it's not that way, at least where private enterprise is involved. Thank you.
Ji, anybody like to respond to that? Fakir Saab, Tammy, Usman, anybody like to respond to that?
I can just
Go ahead. Go ahead.
add my. I think that what we have been saying throughout is, and I said this right in the beginning, is that we are not. I don't think that one should sit here and blame anybody. What we are looking for is a policy from the government that will allow us to do exactly what Mr. Saeed Afridi said. And as Usman said, Pakistan wrote that policy and then retracted it within 6 months. India did not retract its policy. And so it has managed to grow an industry that is one of the largest in the world. Their exports are 20 billion US dollars. Ours are 200 million. So, you know, there are serious problems. I agree, they're all systemic. But until and unless we manage to get a proper regulatory framework, which is what we are working for, and which we keep saying, that deregulate pricing, focus on the draft should be focused on quality control, licensing, etc. Have people with authority sitting there who can do their jobs, who are not afraid, who are not going to be threatened by NAB every day. They should be allowed to function properly so that they take decisions on time, and let the industry have the confidence that after 72 plus years, things will move in a particular direction. And you give that confidence, and then you see how things change. It's exactly what happened in other countries. I mean, there's no reinventing the wheel. The formula is out there.
Okay. Let me take another one. Farah Bibi. Farah.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
Please, introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, this is me, Farah here. I'm doing PhD from Pakistan Institute of Development Economics. My question is actually like, you know, a part of like my experience. Basically, I observe in the you know, in the medicines, you know, game, etc. I may say that the same medicine with the same generic name is available at, you know, at a price of 50. The similar medicine with the same generic name is also available more than 500 or above that as well. And when we come to the retail, the price at which it is supplied at the medical stores, so the one who which is, you know, at the price of 50 rupees, that is being supplied at 50 rupees to the medical store, but the on paper price, on box price is the same, like 450 and 500, and there is another product with maybe from the multinational or etc. giving only 15% margin. So there is a huge difference between the same product with same generic name and more or less the same, you know, quality of healing it may provide. Why there is too much differences in the prices present, and who is actually taking the benefit out of it?
Usman sir, will you answer that?
Sure. Thank you, Farah. That's a very good question. And you're right in the sense that there is a lot of variability in pricing and practices also. And that brings us back to the point जो शुरू में तौकीर साहब भी टाइम में भी रेज कर रही थी और मैं भी reinforce करने की कोशिश कर रहा था कि आप जब तक कि practices streamline और quality regulate नहीं करेंगे तो आपको इस तरह की discrepancies नजर आएंगी. 700 अगर कंपनियां हैं जिसमें से 95% सेल टॉप 100 का रही है, तो फिर you know, many companies for their existence will do many things that are not either transparent or the right thing to do or ethical, in other words. तो जब तक आप ये नहीं इंश्योर कर सकते कि पाकिस्तान में जितनी फैक्ट्रीज से दवाई निकल रही हैं वो एग्जैक्टली एक ही स्टैंडर्ड की हैं, तो फिर प्राइसिंग वगैरह सारे सेकेंडरी आ जाते हैं इशू. ये बेसिक चीज यहाँ से शुरू करने की जरूरत है.
थैंक यू जी. मोहम्मद रमजान साहब, यार मुझे नाम नहीं पूरा पढ़ा जा रहा,
बताइए. जी, अस्सलाम वालेकुम जी. Ji, Rahim, it's fine. Ji, I have to.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Ji, sure. Ji, I'm a student of the pharmaceutical industry, Ji, and I'd like to understand two things. Ji, ek to, I think Madam Aisha pointed out that India has $20 billion in exports. Similarly, Jordan, a very, very small country, is nearing $1 billion in exports. So are there reasons other than the regulator that keep the Pakistani pharmaceutical industry from investing in its local manufacturing capacity to at least be able to export more? We're at around $200 million currently, I think. And the second quick point that I'd like to raise, that I'd like to get some comments on from the speakers, is around the relationship between physicians and pharma. This is something that has been talked about for a very long time. It's not just in Pakistan, but globally an issue. It's a transactional relationship. There seems to be an exchange of benefits. It leads to overprescription of certain drugs, developing, not only out-of-pocket expenses, increased out-of-pocket expenses for customers, but also increases in antimicrobial resistance. So I'll just leave you with those 2 points, please. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ji. Thank you, Ji. Any last thoughts, comments, Ji? Taqir Sahab? Taqir Sahab हैं चले गए? Taqir Sahab? जी. मैंने कहा जी, any last comments, thoughts?
Last common thoughts यही है जी कि industry has lots of potential, and as I was saying in the beginning, that pharmaceutical industry, national industry has grown very significantly over the last 15 years. So I think industry also has to make sure that they are all set, not only to bring new molecules, new treatment options, and they should also expand their business. As we have seen that pandemic has created another requirement that we should have vaccines. So I believe 2-3 companies have started thinking seriously about going for local manufacturing of vaccines, and certainly it has to pass through lots of regulatory requirements like approval from WHO, but the seriousness has been started. And plus we have lots of potential for export. As Aisha was mentioning, that we have only $200 million export. So in order to go to expand our export, we need to have lots of relief from the government also, because in order to get ourselves registered outside Pakistan, we have to continuously upgrade our manufacturing plants, and that is a very expensive exercise. And for that, if we are given relief in terms of taxes and duties to upgrade our manufacturing plant, more companies, because at this point in time about 25 to 30 companies are exporting. So when government will give us incentivized policy to upgrade our plant, we will be able to get our manufacturing plant recognized by the international regulatory bodies, and export will certainly expand. And at the same time, government should also encourage, and as they are, right from 1976, they are getting a central research fund for 1%. So that fund, we don't know where that fund is lying. That fund should be, used for research. वो जो आप स्टडीज की बात कर रहे थे, कुछ पोर्शन उसमें गवर्नमेंट लगाए, प्लस ये कि APIs के लिए दे शुड टेक्नोलॉजी ट्रांसफर है ये बहुत बड़ी, उधर फंड करे, और ये रिसर्च फंड जो है गवर्नमेंट हमें वापस दे. हम तैयार हैं, कंसिस्टेंट पॉलिसीज हों, तो यकीनन इस इंडस्ट्री में बहुत पोटेंशियल है, नॉट ओनली फॉर डोमेस्टिक बिजनेस बट ये एक्सपोर्ट. दिस इज गवर्नमेंट शुड ट्रीट pharmaceutical industry as a new product, because the growth comes from new products. So new product in terms of export business. So जिस तरीके से बाकी sectors को relief दिया जाता है, textile है, इसके अलावा आप leather है, अगर pharmaceutical industry की export बढ़ानी है तो government हमारे साथ दे, और यकीन करें कि if गवर्नमेंट इज विद अस और हमें कंसिस्टेंट पॉलिसी दी जाती है, इंसेंटिव दिया जाता है, स्टेट बैंक के थ्रू हमें सॉफ्ट लोन दिए जाते हैं लॉन्ग टर्म बेसिस पे, तो आपको ये फ्रॉम एज अ चेयरमैन PPM में आई कुड वेरी कॉन्फिडेंटली से कि इन 5-6 years टाइम हमारी जो 200 मिलियन की जो सेल, ये जो एक्सपोर्ट है, दैट विल रीच बियॉन्ड $2 billion. तो वो पोटेंशियल है. तो वी आर रेडी टू, एज अ इंडस्ट्री वी आर रेडी टू वर्क विद रेगुलेटर्स, विद गवर्नमेंट. आई थिंक कि अगर सब मिलके इस तरफ चलते हैं तो यकीनन एक बहुत अच्छा मुस्तकबिल हमारे लिए है, इन टर्म्स ऑफ रेवेन्यूज, इन टर्म्स ऑफ क्वालिटी मेडिसिन, इन टर्म्स ऑफ सीइंग पाकिस्तान, हम अपने ब्रांड्स जो हैं वो अपनी नेबरिंग कंट्रीज़ में और एक्सपोर्ट भी करने के लिए तैयार होंगे. सिर्फ और सिर्फ चीज़ ये है कि कंसिस्टेंसी हो, पॉलिसी हो, और स्टेक होल्डर्स जो इंडस्ट्री को साथ लेके अगर फैसले किए जाएंगे और उनकी बात सुनी जाएगी मेरिट पे, तो यकीनन ये इंडस्ट्री जो है वो बहुत आगे फ्लरिश कर सकती है. दिस इज माय take of this.
Thank you very much, आयशा बीबी. ये जो स्टेक होल्डर वाली बात है, मुझे इससे बड़ी घबराहट होती है, बिकॉज स्टेक होल्डर सब मिलके हमारी पॉलिसीज बनाते हैं, कॉमर्स की भी, इंडस्ट्री की भी, और अक्सर पॉलिसीज सेल्फ सर्विंग होती हैं. How do we get a proper stakeholder consultation if we just have self-serving policies? But last word from you, and then we'll close.
I think we've had some significant stakeholder engagement already. And when you say stakeholders, that means everybody. It doesn't just mean the industry. It means government, it means the public, it means everybody. Consumer groups are involved. So I think, stakeholder involvement is huge, it's very important, and that's something we should encourage. I wanted to just, the gentleman who spoke about Jordan, etc. I wanted to just point out that Jordan has 3 FDI-approved plants, and they manufacture for export. So that's why the exports are so huge. They have a very small population, but they're manufacturing billions worth of drugs, which they are exporting. We don't have a single FDI-approved plant. I mean, we have very few WHO-approved facilities. Forget plants. We have very few facilities that are approved. So what we really need to do in Pakistan is to go forward. We need to start looking at opportunity. This is an industry that can provide huge amounts of jobs. It doesn't get any subsidies. It doesn't get any subsidies on electricity, water, nothing. So it's not a drain on the exchequer, it's contributing to the exchequer. Let it contribute more. Find a way for it to contribute more, find a way for it to grow, find a way for it to move forward. One thing I'd like to say is that as far as the Central Research Fund is concerned, I think what we really need to do is perhaps have tax breaks for the industry, where if they're going to do research and then they need to import huge amounts of machinery or equipment or whatever, they should get 0 rated tax on all that. And I think that would encourage research in Pakistan. I mean, that's something we really need to do. But if you're going to have to pay huge amounts and pay the Central Research Fund, which we have not seen anything from, it's a non-starter. You need to incentivize people to do something. There's a huge amounts of problems that have accumulated over the years, since 1947 to 2001 to 2021. Sorry, things really haven't moved much. We need to move them along. How do we move them along? I mean, you're the economist, Nadeem. You tell us how to move it along.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, folks. I only know one way to move policy along, which is to actually do serious research and discuss it and debate it. Unfortunately, in our country, we neither want to do serious research nor discuss and debate it. As I said, my friends, the industrialists, sit in, there's a thesis, PhD thesis that was done in South Africa that talked about it. But most of the policy is made in social settings and not in committee settings. And most of the policy is made on lobbying. This is a culture that we have to break. How we will break it, I'm not so sure. For example, somebody mentioned the Operation Warp Speed. I mean, think about how Operation Warp Speed happened. And I actually listened very carefully to all the FDA hearings. And honestly, it was a pleasure to hear those hearings. They were public, they were professional, they were well-researched, they were well thought out. Everybody had done their homework. And it was a set of very competent, serious doctors and professionals who attended the hearing. Not a single secretary, not the president, not even Dr. Fauci, nobody. I think there are systems that need to be made for making policy. Unfortunately, in our feudal culture, we can't make those systems. I think I just recently wrote an apology to the next generation. Please, if you have the time to read it, it's on Medium. I think, quite frankly, our generation has failed, and I think the next generation is going to fail too. Countries in country time, generations don't mean much. So maybe it'll take us 3 generations to make a system whereby we can make good policy, good thoughts. We haven't arrived there yet, but thank you very much, folks. I've learned a lot. We will try and keep the pharmaceutical industry alive. We are the PIDE. We are engaged in deep research and thought of the country, even if we get no funding, but that doesn't matter. We will continue to do whatever we can. So we will have further pharmaceutical work for you. And we will also try and engage you again and again because we want to learn from you. Thank you. All the best, folks. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shahid. Thank you, everybody. Khuda Hafiz.